After learning to play clear single notes, bending is the #1 problem impeding most harmonica players from playing what they want. Hey, I'm Bryn Scott Grimes here, founder of the Bender YouTube channel and the Bender Harmonica app. I'm a professional session harmonica player based in Nashville, and I help harmonica players learn how to play any melody or song on the diatonic harmonica, as well as how to beatbox with the harmonica, and learn how to play harmonica with guitar and over guitar chord progressions. After teaching over 3,000 one-on-one harmonic lessons, I can tell you that there are many different reasons why you may not be able to still bend, or you're struggling with bending. Now, first of all, bending is not easy. It's a physical athletic skill, just like juggling or doing the splits or walking a tightrope. So if you're just starting out on harmonica, or you've just been playing for under a year or so, don't beat yourself up on it. It does take time, and your body really needs to learn and grow stronger. The muscles have to strengthen and adapt for you to be able to bend properly with full range of motion and pitch accuracy. It's not something that you can just mentally try and understand and then be able to do instantaneously, though I will say there is a huge discrepancy in how fast some people will learn how to bend versus others. First, let's cover some common mistakes people make when bending. Mistake #1 is not learning enough about bending before learning how to bend. Sometimes education is simply the best answer. If, for example, you don't know where bending is possible on a harmonica, or you don't know what a semitone is, or you don't know the difference between blow bending and draw bending, then you're just flying blind, and you won't know what to listen for or where to properly initiate the technique. Memorizing the note layout for the harmonicas you want to learn to bend on, and learning where bends occur and how many semitones occur on each hole is crucial. Without that knowledge, you'll be flying even more blind than you already are as a harmonica player. If you want to learn how to do this, there is an excellent course on my Bender Harmonica app that teaches you everything you need to know about bending. And you can access this course with a monthly or annual subscription, or you can buy it outright with a one-time fee, and I'll put the links in the description for both of these options. Mistake #2 is not getting good at playing clear single notes before moving on to bending. It's the same issue as trying to learn how to run before you can reliably walk. Most beginner harmonica players are messy. They play a couple of notes at once, or accidentally, or without even knowing it, or they play single notes that are airy, leaky, thin, or obstructed. If you can't play single notes with nearly 100% accuracy yet, I recommend not moving on to bending quite yet, because bending requires laser clear single notes as the base. Sometimes the harmonica quality itself can be an issue. Really cheap harmonicas are quite airy and they're harder to bend on. However, a good harmonica player will be able to bend on any harmonica either way. But if you're just learning, make sure you have a decent harmonica first. If you're looking for suggestions, you can check out my course called What Harmonicas to Buy, which will be linked in the description as well. Mistake #3 is not providing sufficient airflow when trying to bend. Overall, it's better to learn bending with a faster airflow. Quiet breathing, which equals slow breathing, doesn't quite have the energy to sustain or trigger a bend. Though it doesn't require a hugely forceful breath either, bending requires some degree of airspeed. I would say about 70% of your maximum breath volume. I can prove this by playing a regular note as quietly as possible, then trying to play a bent note at the same volume. Mistake #4 is not hiking the back of your tongue high enough in your mouth, or paying close enough attention to the subtle movements of your mouth, tongue, and throat. You need to pay close attention to how your neck, tongue, lip, and mouth muscles are moving, then you need to hone in on what the problem is. For example, the back of your tongue, right where your throat starts, is the sweet spot for bending. But often most people just try moving their whole tongue, which often leads to just making a tonal change without actually affecting the pitch. It sounds like this. Mistake #5 is not trying hard enough. Now, I know this is a bit of a tricky thing to accuse people of, but to be honest, there are just a lot of people out there who simply don't put in enough attempts or try hard enough in their attempts to break through and really get a grasp on bending. It's the same problem people have in fitness. They go to the gym a couple times, they spend too much time on their phone or just lifting the weight until it kind of hurts a bit, then they put it down and spend another 5 minutes deciding what exercise to do next, with barely any intensity. To learn how to bend well, you need to put real effort into it. Your mouth and tongue should be tired when you're done practicing. If you think you may be guilty of this, I challenge you to try bending 100 times in a row on the same hole, going for the same bent note without taking a break, and count each and every attempt. In terms of trying hard during each attempt, you need to familiarize yourself with the word tenacity. Harmonica bending is not a meek, light-handed, soft, fragile technique. You've got to get into it and really crank it out. Once you get good at it, it'll feel as easy as breathing, but that's because your tongue muscles grow in strength as you learn. I like to think of doing a caricature of whatever you're used to doing. Caricatures, of course, are the cartoons that are exaggerated versions of reality. For example, try moving the back of your tongue up in your mouth. Now, try it again, but do it with exaggeration. If you're trying to enunciate, say, a K, an L, or an R sound in your mouth, do it like you're speaking with an accent, or you're on stage performing at an Eastern European tragedy opera. You need to allow yourself to be silly while trying to bend and doing bending exercises. And honestly, you might even break a sweat doing it. Just like doing vocal warm-ups, bending exercises often look and feel kind of ridiculous, but they are truly effective, so you just need to loosen up and roll with it. The harmonica is a quirky instrument, and it requires you to make some pretty strange noises along the way to perfecting your tone. So if you feel a bit self-conscious doing these, just try and find a private room or go practice in a parked car in a parking lot. Now, we've covered the most common bending mistakes. Let me give you some suggestions on how to improve your bending if you're currently having a hard time. Tip number 1 is to use vowels, consonants, and nonsense words to learn how to subtly manipulate the shape of the inside of your mouth and your tongue to get bends to pop out. For example, for bending on the 2 and 3 draw, K sounds tend to work well in fetching those stubborn bends. For example, try saying cur, K-R, with an extra crispy, punchy K 5 times in a row. Cur, 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 cur. Now try the same thing on an inhale. Now try that same thing on the 2 or 3 hole of your C harmonica. I have one right here. I'm going to do KR on an inhale on a 2 on the lowest bend. It's got a nice punchy sort of round, almost like a muted trumpet sound to it. I've seen students many times yank out bends using the nonsense KR sound because the K creates a fast jet stream and the R closes the back of the throat by raising the tongue up. If KR isn't working for you, try other variations. K, ki, K, and ku. Try doing a what I call K matrix. Following in the spirit of the previous exercise, try doing them all in a row in a sequence. Ka, kur, ka, ki, K. Let's try that one more time, but on an inhale. Ka, kur, ka, ki, K. And then you're going to do all of those on the bends of the 2 and the 3. Of course, if you're starting out and you don't know what the bends of the 2 and the 3 are, just try those on the regular 2 and 3 draw. Often little bent notes will just pop out from doing that on a regular note, and that's how you know it's very effective. When you're doing this, really push into the enunciation and snap of those K sounds. Articulate as much as you can and do the sequence 100 times in a row. Here are some other nonsense words to experiment with that have also achieved breakthroughs with my students as well. Weeyuh, riah, leel, and yai. With each one of these, start by either emptying or filling your lungs up completely, depending on whether you're doing a draw or blow bend, and then repeat the nonsense words as many times as you can for a full breath, making sure to super enunciate each time. The idea is to do them over and over and over. So let's take one for example, leel, 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 leel. Or let's take riah, 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 riah. Now let's do it on an inhale. Riah, 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 riah. And now we're going to try it extra enunciated. So it's going to be riah, 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 riah. And notice how at the end I made it all the way and I completely filled my lungs. That was on an inhale. If you were doing this for blow bends from the 7 to the 10, that would be on the exhale. Okay. And just to clarify one thing, you don't actually have to say the words because we actually don't need to use our vocal cords when we're playing harmonica. We're just emulating the shape of our mouth when we're making that word. When you're doing these, try and get the back of your tongue as high as possible for each bend, except for the one draw, where you're going to actually want to do the opposite and lower the back of your tongue down instead. Remember, when you're using words to practice bending, you need to move your tongue further than you normally would when you speak regular language. The bending sweet spot is all the way at the back of the tongue, and it requires the tongue to go a little higher than one would ever normally put it when speaking. A perfect example of this is how Gollum speaks in The Lord of the Rings. The voice actor tightens the back of their throat using their tongue to say things like this: "My precious, we want it, we need it, must have the precious." As ridiculous as it sounds, learning to speak like Gollum will actually put your tongue in almost exactly the same position that bending requires. So go for it. Tip number 2 is to use different cues to try and get your mouth and tongue into the right position. For example, for some of my students, if I tell them to move the back of their tongue up at the back of their throat, it may work. For others, if I tell them to move their tongue down, that actually works better. Regardless of what is actually physically happening, the cue itself will have different effects. And it actually doesn't really matter if the cue is right or not. It just matters if it helps you learn how to bend better. Here are a couple of cues that you can try. Try each one of them on every hole of your harmonica where you can bend, and see how your body reacts differently. Take notes of which cue works best on each hole, and focus on using that cue in your practicing. Cue number 1 is move the back of your tongue up and down. With this cue, you're going to obviously do this while you're breathing, so let's take the one hole draw. You're going to think about moving your tongue up and down. That's with the C harmonica once again. So once again, think about the cue and then try the cue and see how your body reacts. Cue number 2 is move your tongue forwards and backwards in your mouth. Now, the reason why this cue works well is because when you move your tongue backwards, it actually has nowhere to go. And so it tends to go up or down. So even though the same thing physically is happening, it's a different cue and a different way of thinking about it. And for you, it may work better. Cue number 3 is to think of your mouth like an adjustable tunnel that can shrink and expand like this. Now, when you try and bend, I want you to constrict the tunnel, making it super small, and then relax and open the tunnel when you return to a regular note. This is a totally different way of thinking about bending versus thinking of up and down with your tongue. Once again, for some people, this may work better than for others. All right, tip number 3 is to use online tools, apps, audio files, and or piano or guitar to help you understand bending and hear bent notes more clearly. Because bends are invisible and we can only hear them, if you're first learning how to bend, it can be tricky to know if you're actually doing it right. One great tool is called the Bend It Better tool. It's a great online resource that allows you not only to hear bent notes, but also it listens to you play and shows you in real time what your pitch is. There's also a harmonica app called Harmonica Tuner Pro, which does the same thing. The only problem with both of these apps is that they don't show you exactly what the tones sound like in real life. They'll use MIDI tones or just these little recordings that aren't really that accurate. But on my Bender Harmonica app, I have audio files that you can listen to that show you exactly what the bends should sound like. And once again, the link will be in the description for those. Before I go on to tip number 4, I'd just like to congratulate you and thank you for being one of the rare 20% of people who make it 80% of the way through my entire video. If you are finding this information valuable, consider subscribing, hitting the thumbs up button and notification bell, because it helps this video find other harmonica players who would benefit from the same information. Thank you. Okay, back to tip number 4. Train your ears as much as you train your tongue. Even if you have the abilities to bend, that doesn't necessarily mean your bent notes are going to have the right pitch. You have to develop your ears alongside your body, or the effort you put into moving the reed will be futile. It's especially crucial that you can hear semitones, since you need to be able to divide up the bending spectrum on, say, the 2 and the 3 hole and the 10 to play semitones individually as if they were different keys on a keyboard. I recommend learning musical intervals to do this and to train your ears. If you don't know what intervals are, check the links in the description for more information. Tip number 5 is practice bending on different harmonica keys and models. As wide a range as possible, because bending feels slightly different on each harp key and model, and you want to get adept at using a wide range so that you're versatile as possible in any playing situation. Ideally, the keys are also far apart from each other, so like a C, a G, and an F sharp, something that's in the middle, low, and high. The more keys you can bend on, the better you get at bending. Also, sometimes breakthroughs will happen on one key that will lead to a breakthrough on another. In fact, it's not a bad idea to go back and forth between focusing on one hole on two different harmonicas. For example, the 2-hole draw on a C harp and the 2-hole draw on a G harp, working on the bends of both and going back and forth. Because the technique is similar but slightly different, and it challenges your mouth and tongue to quickly adapt and build more strength and versatility. All right, brilliant bender. Now's the time where you comment on the video letting me know how well these tips worked for you. Remember to give yourself time, sufficient attempts, and lots of effort before dismissing any of these or moving on to another instrument. Be patient with yourself. Bending takes time and effort, but is well worth it in the end. Comment below with your takeaways, questions, and suggestions for future videos. If you're interested in studying with me in one of my online ongoing programs or one-on-one, there's a link in the description to sign up or have a quick call with me to discuss. Till next time, breathe deep and breathe on. Adios.